Hi friends, my name is Amanda. I'm a registered dietitian and chef, and today I'm going to walk you through the simple process of soaking, sprouting, and dehydrating beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, and grains. Before I dive into the steps involved in soaking, sprouting, and dehydrating, let's just address why we want to do this in the first place. The primary reason is we want to lower the amount of phytic acid found in things such as mung beans, wild rice, pecans, pistachios, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, macadamia, as well as barley and quinoa. Phytic acid is produced by plants as a defense mechanism. However, when we as humans consume phytic acid, particularly in large amounts, this can interfere with important vitamin and mineral absorption. So in order to reap the benefits of all these wonderful foods, we can lower the amount of phytic acid present by soaking, sprouting, and then finally dehydrating for longer storage times. Now here is a forewarning, which is you do have to plan ahead if you're going to soak, sprout, and dehydrate because it is a lengthy process. It's not a complicated one, but it does take some planning on your part. Let's start off with step number 1, which is soaking. So before you can even sprout anything, you actually have to soak it first. So again, all your beans, legumes, grains, nuts, or seeds. Before you soak, you do have to rinse. So here I just have some whole pecans. I put it into a fine mesh strainer. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse it. Once I've finished rinsing it, I'm gonna put it into a jar. I just have a few pecans here right now, so I'm just gonna stuff it into my jar right here. Cover it with a decent amount of water, then just cover, and I can let this soak overnight. Okay, so there we have it. That's the first step, soaking. So from here, after you soak, say, these pecans, the next morning, once I drain the water out, I can actually just go ahead and consume it just like that. I can throw it into my oatmeal, I can blend into my smoothie, I can put it in my salads, and that's that. Do you have to sprout pecans or different nuts? I personally don't. They don't necessarily really sprout, such as like these mung bean sprouts over here. You might not see a gigantic tail like this, but they do have a little bit of germination that can occur. Personally though, I just go ahead, soak it, drain it, and I just consume it. If you plan to store them for a longer period of time, you can then go ahead and dehydrate it. I'll jump back into that step in just a second, but let's go through the process of sprouting. So earlier I had mentioned the very first step again is rinsing and then soaking them. So let's pretend I have some mung beans over here. They're in the dry state. I'm gonna go ahead and put a decent amount in this mason jar. I'm gonna rinse it and soak it. So let's just pretend now again. Go ahead. We're gonna rinse. Okay. These are some really handy dandy lids. I love them. They're actually meant for soaking and sprouting. So you see they have these little fine holes over there. So I've rinsed it. I'm going to soak it now. And pretend that this now has been soaking for, say, overnight, okay? The next morning, I can go ahead now and then I will drain out the water. So drain. From here, I can actually then just prop it like so because the lids are really handy dandy. They have these little kind of legs. Just prop it like so. And then I can let that sit in a dark area and just let it sprout. It takes time, okay, you gotta be patient, about sometimes even up to 4 to 5 days for it to fully sprout. With mung beans, it usually takes only about 2 to 3 days. Now every day I do like to rinse it out twice. So same thing, I will open up the jar again, fill it with water, drain it, and then leave it in its special little place. Now normally I just put it inside a space in my pantry because it's nice and dark there. You can also stick it in your oven if you don't always turn on your oven. The other option is if you just have like a cloth bag, you can actually just go ahead and cover this up like so. And then it's away from any sunlight. If you don't have these type of lids, you can just purchase them online or Amazon. that's fine. All you need to do is, I can also take this similar bag, which is like a fine mesh again. You can use a cheesecloth. Put it over your jar. And then after that, you can either take the lid of a mason jar like this, or a rubber elastic band, and same thing, you just tilt it, but you do have to lay it on something. So normally I just put it against the wall, so it has something to prop it up. So this way there's always oxygen flowing in. This is really important. We don't want to completely seal it. The reason why we want to use a meshed bag or a cheesecloth is that there's still air circulation in there for the germination to occur or sprouting to occur. So with these legs, it gives it a little bit of gap here, so it's not just sitting on top of the plate. So that's why I really highly recommend just purchasing them. Very, very inexpensive, but it's gonna make your life a lot easier because you don't even have to pull out a strainer. This is like a 2-in-1, okay? So with sprouting, again, it does take a couple of days depending on what you are sprouting. Something like quinoa may only take 1 or 2 days. Mung beans take 2 to 3 days. If you're sprouting chickpeas, could take up to 5 to 6 days. The warmer the climate, the faster it will sprout as well. You might be wondering, do you have to let the sprout grow until it's like 1 inch in length or even longer? Not at all. You really just have to wait until you see the little bit of a tail, and then you can go ahead and boil it just as you normally would, be it quinoa or maybe you're having chickpeas or pinto beans. Just boil it until it's softened, and then you can consume it that way. Now, if you want to make a large batch of sprouted, say, grains or legumes, and you want to keep it for a longer period of time, you can actually go ahead and then dehydrate it. So similarly with my nuts, if I want it nice and crispy and use as a snack because you don't want to soak it every night before, maybe you just want the texture to be a little bit more crunchy, you can also follow the same method when it comes to dehydrating. For large batches, I would just recommend using your oven. It does take about 12 to 24 hours depending on what you are dehydrating. In the oven, I just put it on a baking tray. I usually just line it with a Silpat like this, so the silicone base, and then I will dehydrate at about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. My oven doesn't go any lower than that, so I just choose 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Alternatively, you can use dehydrators if you want at a lower temperature. Now, some will argue lower temperatures are better because it allows the live enzymes. Personally though, you're probably not going to eat those dehydrated nuts and seeds and grains and legumes right away, so those enzymes will die off anyways, so don't worry too much about the temperature of things, okay? But if you do have a dehydrator, such as this one, right, you would just line your legumes in the different trays, set it up, and it will take, again, about 12 to 24 hours depending on what you're dehydrating. There's also, for those with an Instant Pot, there is a dehydrator function on Instant Pots. This is the air fryer version, but I do have a dehydrator setting, so I can set the exact temperature. But if you're, again, doing large bulks, I would either do an oven or I would use a dehydrator to do so. So there you have it. Now let's summarize the steps involved. Number 1, rinse your grain, legume, nut, or seed, followed by soaking it for about minimum 4 hours all the way to overnight. The next step is you can drain it and consume the nuts right away, or maybe the seeds such as chia seeds and flax seeds that just really require soaking. If you're wanting to sprout it, that's fine. You're gonna go ahead, after you drain it out, you are going to put it into a jar such as this. You're gonna rinse out all the water, put your cap on, and just let it sprout in a dark corner or dark area. Every day though, try to rinse out the legume or the grain at least twice. After a couple of days, once you see the little tail germinate through, you can go ahead and just cook it like normal. So maybe in this case, I could just boil these mung beans really quickly. I could, again, simmer the quinoa until they're nice and soft and then consume it in that way. If you want to have crunchy nuts once you have soaked them, or maybe you want to prolong the life of your legumes because you want to boil them all at one time, you can actually dehydrate them for longer storage life. To dehydrate, you can either use the oven, dehydrator function, or the Instant Pot at 105 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 to 24 hours. Now, if all this seems really, really daunting for you, try just doing that first step, which is rinsing and soaking. You can also start purchasing already sprouted and dehydrated grains, nuts, and seeds either at your local supermarket or online. Here I have some that I actually purchased. These are lentils that have been sprouted and then dehydrated, and they can keep for about 2 years in your cupboard. There's also tons of what they call activated nuts or seeds that have been sprouted and dehydrated as well. I hope you found this information valuable. And remember, you are not what you eat, but rather what you absorb. So use these principles of soaking, sprouting, and dehydrating to really optimize your digestion and assimilation of nutrients from beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, and grains. Until next time, relish every bite.